Sophia Martinez stood in the marble bathroom of her Riverside Heights townhouse, hands trembling as she stared at the pregnancy test resting on the counter. 2 pink lines. Clear, unmistakable, impossible to deny. After 3 years of failed attempts, countless fertility treatments and more tears than she could count, she was finally pregnant. Her heart hammered against her ribs as joy flooded through her body. She pressed a hand to her stomach, barely able to breathe. This was real. After all the doctor appointments, the hormone injections, the monthly disappointments that left her sobbing in empty nurseries, God had finally answered her prayers. She needed to tell Ethan. Sophia grabbed the test, her bare feet padding quickly across the cold floor as she rushed down the curved staircase. She found her husband in the living room, standing by the window with his arms crossed, staring out at the manicured lawn. "Ethan," she said breathlessly, holding out the test. "Look, I'm pregnant." He turned slowly. His dark eyes landed on the test in her hand, then moved to her face. But there was no smile, no joy, no relief, just cold, hard suspicion. "That's not mine." The words hit her like a physical blow. Sophia's smile faltered, confusion clouding her features. "What? Ethan, of course it's yours. Who else would it be?" Before he could respond, Margaret appeared from the hallway, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Ethan's mother had been living with them for 6 months now, and her presence had slowly poisoned everything Sophia once believed about her marriage. Margaret's lips curved into a knowing smirk as she looked between them. "I told you," Margaret said softly, addressing her son. "Women like her trap men with pregnancies. It's the oldest trick in the book." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "That's not fair." "Margaret, you know that's not true." But Ethan wasn't looking at her anymore. His jaw was tight, his eyes hard with something that looked disturbingly like disgust. "How do I know it's mine, Sophia?" His voice was flat, emotionless. "We've been trying for 3 years, 3 years of nothing, and suddenly, out of nowhere, you're pregnant." "Because we never gave up," Sophia pleaded, stepping toward him. "The doctors said we were both healthy. They said it could happen at any time." Margaret crossed her arms, her pearl necklace gleaming under the chandelier light. "Doctors say a lot of things, but biology doesn't lie." Sophia felt the room tilting. This couldn't be happening. This was supposed to be the happiest moment of their lives, the moment that would fix everything, that would bring them back together after months of growing distance. Instead, her husband was looking at her like she was a stranger, like she was a liar. "Ethan, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You have to believe me. This is our baby, our miracle." But Ethan's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened further. "I need time to think," he said coldly, turning away from her. Margaret placed a hand on her son's shoulder, protective and possessive. She glanced back at Sophia, with barely concealed triumph in her eyes. "Some women will do anything to secure their place," Margaret said quietly, loud enough for Sophia to hear. "Absolutely anything." Sophia stood frozen in the center of the living room, the pregnancy test still clutched in her shaking hand. The 2 pink lines that should have represented hope now felt like an accusation. Ethan walked past her without another word, heading toward his study. The door closed with a quiet click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. Margaret lingered for a moment longer, her gaze sweeping over Sophia with cold assessment. "You should have known better," she said softly. "Girls like you don't belong in places like this." Then she too disappeared down the hallway, leaving Sophia alone in the vast, empty living room. The miracle she had prayed for, the baby she had dreamed of holding for years, had just become her worst nightmare. And in that moment, standing in a house that had never truly felt like home, Sophia realized that everything she thought she knew about her life, her marriage, and her husband had been built on sand. The foundation was crumbling, and she had nowhere left to stand. 2 years earlier, Sophia had been a different woman entirely. She taught kindergarten at Riverside Elementary, spending her days surrounded by finger paintings, alphabet songs, and children who looked at her like she hung the moon. She loved the chaos of it, the sticky hands, the endless questions, the way a 5-year-old's hug could make any bad day disappear. Her apartment back then had been small but cozy, filled with plants she actually remembered to water, and books stacked on every available surface. She'd been content, not wealthy, not particularly ambitious, but genuinely happy in a way that didn't require validation from anyone else. That all changed the night of the Harrison Foundation charity gala. Sophia had only attended because her principal insisted the school needed representation at community events. She'd borrowed a dress from her roommate, felt awkward in heels she wasn't used to wearing, and spent the first hour hiding near the refreshment table. That's where Ethan found her. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he'd said, offering her a glass of champagne with an easy smile. He was handsome in an understated way, tall, dark-haired, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed. He didn't wear his wealth like armor the way so many others in that room did. His suit was expensive but not flashy. His watch was elegant but not ostentatious. "Is it that obvious?" Sophia had asked, accepting the glass with a nervous laugh. "Only to someone who feels exactly the same way." They'd talked for hours that night. Ethan told her about his architecture firm, his love of old buildings and historical preservation. She told him about her students, about the little boy who insisted on wearing a superhero cape to class every day, about the girl who brought her dandelions because she thought they were the most beautiful flowers in the world. He didn't look bored. He didn't check his phone. He listened like her words actually mattered. "You light up when you talk about them," he'd said softly. "The kids. They're the best part of my day," Sophia had admitted. "I want 6 of them someday. My own, I mean." She'd expected him to laugh or make a joke, the way most men did when women mentioned wanting children on a first conversation. Instead, Ethan's expression had grown thoughtful. "6 is a good number," he'd said. "Big family, lots of noise, lots of love." That was the moment Sophia started falling. Their courtship had been sweet and surprisingly simple. Ethan took her to small Italian restaurants instead of pretentious establishments. They went hiking on weekends. He showed up at her classroom with coffee on particularly chaotic mornings. He met her friends and didn't act superior. He attended her school's spring musical and clapped the loudest. When he proposed 6 months later on the beach at sunset, Sophia had cried happy tears and said yes without a single doubt. The wedding was modest by his family's standards, but perfect to her. A small garden ceremony, wildflowers instead of roses, her students as flower girls and ring bearers. Margaret had attended, but spent most of the reception making pointed comments about the quaint venue and humble decorations. "Don't worry about my mother," Ethan had whispered as they danced. "She's particular about everything. She'll warm up to you." Sophia had believed him because she wanted to, because love was supposed to conquer all, because the man holding her looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. The first year of marriage had been good. They'd moved into the Riverside Heights townhouse, Ethan's family home. Though he'd assured her they'd make it theirs, Sophia had tried to decorate, to add warmth to the elegant but cold spaces. Ethan had been supportive, encouraging even. Then his father died suddenly of a heart attack, and everything changed. Margaret, newly widowed and desperately lonely, had moved into the guest wing temporarily. That was 18 months ago. The temporary arrangement had become permanent, and with it came a slow, insidious shift in the household dynamics. Margaret criticized everything: the way Sophia arranged flowers, the meals she cooked, the friends she invited over. Nothing was ever quite right, Nothing ever measured up to the standards of the Harrison family legacy. And slowly, painfully, Ethan stopped defending her. He worked longer hours. He took his mother's side in disagreements. He grew distant in ways that felt intentional, like he was pulling away piece by piece, until Sophia couldn't quite remember what closeness felt like anymore. The fertility struggles made everything worse. Month after month of negative pregnancy tests. Margaret's pointed comments about bloodlines and family legacy. Ethan's growing frustration and Sophia's mounting guilt that maybe she really was broken. Maybe she really couldn't give him the one thing his family expected. The doctors found nothing wrong with either of them. "Keep trying," they'd said cheerfully. "Sometimes it just takes time." But time had stretched into years, and hope had curdled into desperation. Sophia had started to wonder if this was her punishment for something, for wanting too much, for believing she could belong in a world that had never wanted people like her. She'd stopped inviting friends over because Margaret made them uncomfortable. She'd quit her teaching job because Ethan suggested a Harrison wife didn't need to work. She'd molded herself into something smaller, quieter, less vibrant, trying desperately to fit into a space that was never designed for her. And through it all, she'd held on to one last thread of hope. A baby. A child would make everything right. A child would prove her worth. A child would give her a place in this family that no one could question or take away. When the pregnancy test finally showed those 2 pink lines, Sophia had believed with her whole heart that her suffering was over. She had believed that love would finally win. She'd been so profoundly, heartbreakingly wrong. The humiliation didn't happen all at once. It crept in slowly like frost spreading across a window pane, until one day Sophia woke up and realized she was living in a house made of ice. It started with small comments at family dinners. "Sophia, dear, that dress is lovely," Margaret would say, her smile perfectly polished. "Very bohemian. I suppose not everyone was raised with formal dining etiquette." The other guests would laugh politely, and Sophia would feel her cheeks burn, while Ethan said nothing, just focused intently on cutting his steak. Then came the comments about her background. "Ethan's father and I always imagined he'd marry someone from our circle," Margaret mentioned casually at a garden party, loud enough for the neighboring conversations to pause. "But I suppose love makes us all a bit foolish, doesn't it?" Sophia learned to smile through the cuts, to pretend she didn't notice the way Margaret's friends assessed her like a curiosity in a museum, something interesting but ultimately out of place. But when the fertility struggles began, the cruelty found a sharper edge. The first time Sophia's period arrived after a promising month, she'd cried in the bathroom for an hour. When she finally emerged, red-eyed and heartbroken, Margaret was waiting in the hallway. "Still nothing?" she'd asked, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "How disappointing. I had 3 children by your age." Month after month, the pattern repeated. Failed pregnancy test, Margaret's knowing looks, Ethan's growing silence. At a charity brunch 14 months into their attempts, Margaret sat with her closest friends at a corner table while Sophia served tea. The conversation drifted, as it always did, to grandchildren and family legacies. 3 years of marriage and still nothing, Margaret announced, her voice carrying across the sunroom. "I'm beginning to think some women simply aren't built for motherhood. Bad genetics, perhaps." The women at the table made sympathetic noises, but their eyes gleamed with gossip. One of them glanced at Sophia with barely concealed pity. Sophia's hands shook as she set down the teapot. She excused herself quickly, walking with as much dignity as she could manage, until she reached the downstairs bathroom. Only then did she let herself collapse against the locked door, sliding down to the cold tile floor as silent sobs racked her body. She stayed there for 20 minutes, trying to rebuild the mask she wore constantly now. When she finally returned to the brunch, no one acknowledged her absence. Margaret was holding court, talking about her upcoming trip to the Hamptons. Ethan had been in his study the entire time, working through lunch as he often did now. When Sophia told him later what his mother had said, he'd sighed heavily. "She doesn't mean anything by it. That's just how she talks. She humiliated me in front of her friends." "You're being too sensitive." He didn't look up from his laptop. "Mom grew up in a different generation. She doesn't understand modern sensitivities." That became his standard response to everything. Too sensitive, too emotional, too quick to take offense. Sophia began to wonder if he was right. Maybe she was the problem. Maybe she couldn't take a joke. Maybe she was too fragile for this world she'd married into. The doctor's appointments became another source of quiet torture. Sophia went to every consultation, every test, every follow-up. The fertility specialist, Dr. James Carter, was kind and patient, explaining that both she and Ethan appeared perfectly healthy. "Sometimes conception just takes time," he'd assured her. "There's no medical reason you can't get pregnant." But when Sophia suggested Ethan come to the next appointment with her, he'd refused. "I don't need a doctor to tell me I'm fine," he'd said dismissively. "The problem is obviously not on my end." The implication hung in the air like smoke. If the doctor said he was healthy, then the failure must be hers, her body, her inadequacy, her fault. Margaret reinforced this narrative at every opportunity. "Ethan's father and I never had trouble conceiving," she mentioned one evening over dinner. "Fertility runs strong in the Harrison bloodline." She didn't say the rest out loud, but Sophia heard it anyway, unlike in yours. The isolation grew worse as months stretched into years. Sophia's friends from her teaching days gradually stopped calling. Margaret had a way of making guests feel unwelcome, of asking invasive questions and making passive-aggressive comments until people found excuses to leave early and never return. Sophia's sister Rachel called weekly at first, but the conversations grew strained. How could Sophia explain what was happening when she barely understood it herself? How could she admit that her fairy tale marriage had become a prison? "You sound different," Rachel said during one call. "Smaller, somehow. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Sophia lied, because admitting the truth felt like admitting failure. "Just tired." She quit her teaching job at Ethan's suggestion. "Harrison wives don't work," he'd said gently, making it sound like a privilege rather than a cage. "You should focus on yourself, on getting healthy, on preparing for when we do have children." Without her students, without her classroom, without the identity she'd built over years of hard work, Sophia felt herself disappearing piece by piece. She spent her days rattling around the enormous townhouse, trying to fill the hours with gardening, reading, cooking elaborate meals that Margaret criticized and Ethan barely touched. She went to the gym Margaret recommended, got her hair done at Margaret's salon, wore the clothes Margaret approved of. She became a shadow of someone else's expectations. The worst part was how normal it all seemed from the outside. Margaret never yelled. Ethan never raised his hand. There were no dramatic fights or explosive arguments, just a steady, relentless erosion of everything Sophia had once been. At night, lying next to a husband who hadn't touched her in months, Sophia would place her hand on her flat stomach and whisper prayers into the darkness. "Please, just give me a baby. If I could just have a child, everything would be okay. I'd have someone who loved me, someone who needed me, someone who proved I wasn't worthless." She didn't realize she was praying for salvation in the wrong place. She didn't know that the miracle she was begging for would become the weapon used to destroy her completely. But in the quiet moments before sleep, in the space between hope and despair, some part of her already knew the truth. She had traded herself for a life that would never value what she'd given up, and the price of that mistake was still coming due. When Sophia finally saw those two pink lines, she allowed herself to believe in redemption. This was it. The answer to 3 years of prayers. The miracle that would fix everything broken in her marriage. The proof that she wasn't defective, wasn't barren, wasn't the failure Margaret had implied she was at every turn. She held the test to her chest and let herself cry tears of pure relief. For 3 days she kept the secret close, planning the perfect moment to tell Ethan. She wanted it to be special, wanted to erase the years of disappointment with one beautiful memory they could hold on to forever. She bought a pair of tiny white baby shoes and wrapped them in tissue paper. She made his favorite meal from scratch, herb roasted chicken with garlic potatoes, the dish she'd cooked on their first date when he'd come to her apartment. She set the table with candles and the good china that usually stayed locked in Margaret's display cabinet. When Ethan came home that evening, she met him at the door with a nervous smile. "I made dinner," she said softly. "Just the two of us. Your mother is at her book club." Ethan looked tired, distracted. "I have emails to answer. Please, just 30 minutes. It's important." Something in her voice made him pause. He studied her face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right." They sat across from each other at the dining room table. Sophia's hands trembled as she passed him the wrapped box. "What's this?" Ethan asked, confusion clouding his features. "Open it." He unwrapped the tissue paper carefully, revealing the tiny shoes. For a moment, his expression went blank, unreadable. Then understanding dawned, and his face hardened into something cold and terrible. "You're pregnant." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Yes," Sophia whispered, her smile faltering. "I took the test 3 days ago. I wanted to surprise you. Ethan, after all this time, we're finally going to have a baby." But there was no joy in his eyes, no relief, no excitement, just suspicion, dark and corrosive. "How do I know it's mine?" The words dropped between them like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through Sophia's entire body. "What?" Her voice came out strangled, barely audible. "Ethan, of course it's yours. Who else would it be?" He set the baby shoes down on the table with deliberate care, his jaw tight. "We've been trying for 3 years, Sophia. 3 years of nothing. Doctors, treatments, tests, and suddenly, out of nowhere, you're pregnant." "That's how it works sometimes," she said desperately, reaching across the table for his hand. He pulled away. "The doctors said we were both healthy. They said it could happen at any time. This is our miracle. Or it's someone else's mistake." The cruelty in his voice made her flinch. This wasn't her husband. This was a stranger wearing Ethan's face, speaking with Ethan's voice, destroying her with Ethan's words. Before she could respond, she heard the unmistakable click of heels on hardwood. Margaret appeared in the doorway, still wearing her coat from book club, but her timing was too perfect, her expression too knowing. She'd been listening, probably from the moment Sophia had handed Ethan the box. "What's going on?" Margaret asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. "Sophia claims she's pregnant," Ethan said flatly. Margaret's eyebrows rose in perfectly performed surprise. She moved into the room slowly, deliberately, like a predator circling wounded prey. "How wonderful," she said, but there was no warmth in it. "Though I must say the timing is rather convenient." "Convenient?" Sophia's voice cracked. "I've been trying to get pregnant for 3 years." "Have you?" Margaret tilted her head, her eyes sharp. "Or have you been trying to trap my son? That's not fair." Tears were streaming down Sophia's face now, hot and bitter. "Margaret, you know that's not true." But Margaret was looking at Ethan now, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Darling, I know this is difficult to hear, but you need to consider the facts. 3 years of nothing and suddenly this? You're a smart man." You've seen the way the gardener looks at her." "The gardener?" Sophia's voice rose in disbelief. "Miguel is 60 years old and happily married. Age doesn't stop certain types of men," Margaret said smoothly, "and lonely women often make poor choices." Ethan's face had gone pale, his hands clenched into fists on the table. Sophia could see him wrestling with something internal, doubt poisoning whatever remained of his trust in her. "Ethan, please," Sophia begged, standing up and moving toward him. "Look at me. You know me. You know I would never do that. This is our baby, our child, the one we've prayed for." But he wouldn't meet her eyes. "DNA doesn't lie," Margaret said quietly, still standing behind her son like a guardian angel of destruction. "Get a paternity test, then you'll know for certain." Ethan nodded slowly, mechanically. "She's right. We need a test." The words shattered something fundamental in Sophia's chest. "You actually believe this? You actually think I would cheat on you?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," Ethan said, his voice hollow. 3 years, Sophia. 3 years of trying, of failing, of watching you fall apart every month. And now suddenly you're pregnant and I'm supposed to just accept it without question." "Yes," she cried, "because I'm your wife, because you're supposed to trust me." Margaret made a soft, sympathetic sound. "Trust is earned, dear, and given the circumstances, I think Ethan's caution is more than reasonable." Sophia looked between them, at the united front they presented, at the way Margaret's hand still rested protectively on Ethan's shoulder. She saw it clearly then, the poison that had been dripping into her marriage for months, maybe years. "She's been planning this," Sophia said, her voice shaking. "Your mother has been poisoning you against me from the beginning, and you've let her." Ethan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Don't blame my mother for your situation." "My situation? This is our baby, Ethan, our child." But he was already walking away, moving toward the hallway with mechanical precision. "I need time to think," he said without turning around. "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight." "Ethan, please don't do this." He paused at the doorway, his back still to her. "Get the paternity test, Sophia. Until then, I don't want to discuss this further." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with Margaret and the ruins of her carefully planned announcement. Margaret picked up one of the tiny baby shoes from the table, examining it with detached interest. "You really should have been more careful," she said conversationally. "Women in your position can't afford to make mistakes." "I didn't make a mistake," Sophia whispered, but her voice had lost its strength. "This is Ethan's child." Margaret set the shoe down and smiled, cold and triumphant. "Then you have nothing to worry about, do you? The test will prove it." She swept past Sophia toward the stairs, calling back over her shoulder. "Clean up the dinner, dear. We can't have the house looking messy." Sophia stood alone in the dining room, surrounded by cold food and melted candles, and the wreckage of her miracle. She placed both hands on her stomach, on the tiny life growing inside her, and whispered into the empty room. "I'll protect you. No matter what happens, I promise I'll protect you." But even as she made the vow, she felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. She just didn't realize yet how far she still had to fall. 2 weeks of silence followed. Ethan moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding eye contact, speaking only when necessary. He slept in the guest room, left for work before sunrise, and returned after Sophia had gone to bed. Margaret watched it all with quiet satisfaction, her presence a constant weight in every room. Sophia tried everything. She left notes on his pillow that went unanswered. She cooked his favorite meals that went uneaten. She stood outside the guest room door at night, hand raised to knock, unable to find the courage to face another rejection. The paternity test required waiting until she was further along in the pregnancy. Dr. Carter had explained gently that testing too early carried risks. "Give it a few more weeks," he'd said, concern evident in his eyes. "In the meantime, try to rest. Stress isn't good for you or the baby." But rest was impossible in a house that felt like a courthouse where she'd already been convicted. On the 14th day, Ethan came home early. Sophia was in the kitchen, forcing herself to eat crackers to combat the morning sickness that had started to plague her. She heard the front door open and felt her heart leap with desperate hope. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe he'd realized how ridiculous this all was. Maybe love had finally won. But when Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, he was carrying a manila folder. His face was set in hard lines, his eyes empty of everything except cold determination. "We need to talk," he said. Sophia set down her crackers, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. "Okay." In the living room, she followed him on shaking legs. Margaret was already there, seated in her usual chair like a queen on a throne, her hands folded primly in her lap. This had been planned, orchestrated. Sophia was walking into an ambush. Ethan stood by the fireplace, not sitting, maintaining the physical height advantage. He opened the manila folder and pulled out several pieces of paper. "These are divorce papers," he said without preamble. "I need you to sign them." The room tilted. Sophia grabbed the back of the sofa to steady herself. "What?" "You heard me." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I want a divorce." "Ethan, please, we can work this out. Just wait for the test. When it proves the baby is yours, I'm not waiting." He set the papers on the coffee table. "Sign them. Leave quietly, and I'll give you $50,000 to start over somewhere else." $50,000. Like their marriage, their vows, their years together could be reduced to a transaction. "This is your child," Sophia said, her voice breaking. "Our child. You can't just throw us away." Margaret leaned forward slightly. "He's being more than generous, Sophia. Most men would have you removed with nothing." "Stay out of this." Sophia turned on her mother-in-law, years of suppressed anger finally breaking through. "You've poisoned him against me from the beginning. You've never wanted me in this family." "I've wanted what's best for my son," Margaret said coldly. "And you were never it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Don't speak to my mother that way. She's destroying our marriage. You destroyed it the moment you got pregnant with another man's child." The accusation hung in the air, vicious and final. Sophia felt something inside her crack, some last piece of hope shattering into fragments too small to ever reassemble. "I have never," she said slowly, each word costing her, "been unfaithful to you. Not once, not ever. That baby is yours, Ethan, and deep down, you know it." But he wouldn't look at her. He kept his eyes fixed on the mantel, on the wedding photo that still sat there, mocking them both with images of people who no longer existed. "Sign the papers," he repeated, "or I'll make this public. I'll tell everyone the truth about what you did. Your friends, your family, everyone you've ever known will hear about how you tried to trap me with another man's baby." It was a threat wrapped in cruelty, designed to intimidate her into compliance. Sophia looked at the papers on the table, at the man she'd loved, at the mother-in-law who'd orchestrated this entire nightmare. She thought about the tiny life growing inside her, innocent and unaware of the hatred surrounding it. "No," she said quietly. Ethan's head snapped toward her. "What?" "I said no. I'm not signing. You want a divorce? You'll have to drag me through court. And when the paternity test proves that baby is yours, everyone will know what kind of man you really are." For a moment, genuine emotion flickered across Ethan's face. Rage, maybe, or fear, but it was quickly replaced by cold calculation. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Send them up," was all he said. Sophia's stomach dropped. "What did you do?" "I gave you a choice," Ethan said. "You refused to take it." 2 minutes later, 2 men in dark suits appeared in the living room. Security guards, professional and expressionless. "Escort Mrs. Harrison from the property," Ethan told them. "She's no longer welcome here." "You can't do this," Sophia breathed, but she could hear the weakness in her own voice. "This is my house," Ethan said. "My family's house. And I want you out of it." The security guards moved toward her, not roughly but with clear intent. Sophia backed away, her mind struggling to process what was happening. "I need to get my things, my clothes, We'll have them sent," Margaret interjected smoothly. "Eventually. My phone, my purse." One of the guards retrieved her purse from the kitchen counter, handing it to her with something that might have been sympathy in his eyes, but he still took her arm gently but firmly, guiding her toward the front door. Sophia looked back at Ethan one last time. He was staring at the floor now, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. "This is a mistake," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You're going to regret this." He didn't respond, didn't look up, didn't acknowledge that he was throwing his pregnant wife out of their home in her pajamas and slippers at 7 o'clock at night. Margaret stood as Sophia was led past, and for just a moment their eyes met. "You should be grateful," Margaret said softly, so only Sophia could hear. "A girl like you should never have expected to stay here. You were temporary from the beginning. You just didn't know it." Then Sophia was outside, standing on the front steps of a house that had been her prison for 2 years. The door closed behind her with a solid, final click. She heard the deadbolt turn. Neighbors were watching from windows. Sophia could feel their eyes on her, their judgment, their gossip already forming. She stood there for a long moment, clutching her purse, wearing pajamas and slippers, her hand pressed protectively over her barely there baby bump. Everything she'd built, everything she'd sacrificed, everything she'd become for the sake of this marriage had just been erased with a phone call and 2 security guards. She had nowhere to go, no job, no home, limited money, and a baby growing inside her that its own father refused to acknowledge. Sophia walked slowly to her car, the only thing she still owned, and sat in the driver's seat as darkness fell around her. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and stared at it, trying to decide who to call. Not her sister. Not yet. She couldn't face the admission of failure, couldn't hear the pity in Rachel's voice. Not her old friends. Margaret had systematically driven them all away. Not her parents. They'd passed away years ago, leaving her with no safety net, no family home to return to. She looked down at the ultrasound photo she kept in her purse, at the tiny blob that would become her child, and felt something shift inside her. Not despair exactly, not yet, but a profound, bone-deep understanding that the woman she'd been, the one who bent and molded and sacrificed herself to fit someone else's expectations, was gone. Whatever came next, she would have to build it from nothing. She would have to save herself, because no one else was coming. Sophia drove aimlessly for an hour before she accepted the truth. She had nowhere to go. The motel she finally found was on the outskirts of town, the kind of place with flickering neon signs and doors that opened directly to the parking lot. She paid cash for 3 nights because that's all she could afford, without accessing their joint bank account, which she was terrified to touch in case Ethan claimed she was stealing from him. The room smelled of old cigarettes and industrial cleaner. The bedspread was worn thin in places, and there was a suspicious stain on the carpet near the bathroom. But it was shelter. It was somewhere to sleep. It would have to be enough. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her pajamas, and let herself break completely. She cried until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen shut. She cried for the marriage she'd lost, for the man she'd thought she'd married, for the naivety that had led her to believe love could survive poison. She cried for her baby, who would grow up knowing its father had rejected it before it even drew breath. When the tears finally stopped, the sun was rising through the thin curtains, painting everything in shades of grey. Sophia hadn't slept at all. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, puffy eyes, tangled hair, yesterday's mascara streaked down her cheeks. She looked like a stranger. She looked like someone who'd given up. Pride kept her from calling Rachel. Pride and shame and the devastating knowledge that admitting what had happened would make it real in a way she wasn't ready to face. But she needed help. She couldn't survive in a motel room indefinitely. She couldn't go through pregnancy alone with no support, no resources, no plan. There was only one person she could think of who might understand, who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and never judged: Dr. James Carter. Her hands shook as she dialed the fertility clinic. It was barely 7 in the morning, but she knew Dr. Carter often arrived early. The receptionist who answered sounded surprised to hear from her. "Mrs. Harrison, are you calling about your prenatal appointment?" "I need to speak with Dr. Carter," Sophia said, her voice hoarse from crying. "Please, it's urgent. He's with a patient right now, but I can have him call you back. Tell him it's an emergency." Sophia closed her eyes. "Please." Something in her tone must have conveyed the desperation, because the receptionist's voice softened. "Hold on." 3 minutes later, Dr. Carter's familiar, calm voice came through the line. "Sophia, what's wrong?" And just like that, the careful control she'd been maintaining shattered again. The story came out in broken pieces: the accusation, the divorce papers, being thrown out of her own home. She tried to keep her voice steady, but it kept fracturing on words like abandoned and alone and nowhere to go. Dr. Carter listened without interrupting, and when she finally finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Where are you right now?" he asked gently. She gave him the name of the motel, shame burning in her chest. "I'm between appointments right now," he said. "My nurse can handle things for an hour. Stay where you are. I'm coming to you." "You don't have to." "Sophia." His voice was firm but kind. "You're pregnant. You're in crisis and you're one of my patients. Stay where you are." He hung up before she could argue. 40 minutes later, there was a knock on the motel room door. Sophia opened it to find Dr. Carter standing there with a bag from the cafe across the street and genuine concern written across his face. He was younger than most specialists, maybe 40, with graying temples and the kind of steady presence that made people instinctively trust him. He'd been the one doctor throughout her fertility struggles who'd never made her feel broken or defective. "May I come in?" he asked. Sophia stepped aside, suddenly aware of what the room must look like, what she must look like. But Dr. Carter didn't seem to notice or care. He set the bag on the small table by the window. "Tea and toast," he said. "You need to eat something, especially with morning sickness." "I'm not hungry." "I know. Eat anyway." There was something about the gentle command that made Sophia obey. She sat at the table and forced herself to take small bites of toast while Dr. Carter pulled out his phone and made a call. "Mrs. Chen, it's James Carter. I have a patient who needs temporary housing. Very temporary, very urgent. Do you still have that apartment above the cafe?" Sophia's eyes widened, but he held up a hand, asking her to wait. "Yes, she's trustworthy. No pets. She's pregnant and going through a difficult situation. She needs somewhere safe and quiet." He paused, listening. "That's incredibly generous of you. I'll bring her by this afternoon." When he hung up, Sophia was staring at him in disbelief. "I can't accept charity," she said quietly. "It's not charity. Mrs. Chen has had that apartment empty for 6 months. She's been looking for the right person to rent it. Her daughter passed away a few years ago, and she's particular about who lives there. Dr. Carter sat across from her. She's offering it to you at a rate you can afford, and before you say you can't afford anything, she said we'd work out the details later. Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks again. Why are you doing this? Because you need help and I'm in a position to offer it. He leaned forward slightly. Sophia, I've watched you go through 3 years of fertility treatments with grace and determination. I've seen how much you want this baby, how hard you've fought for it. What your husband is doing is cruel and wrong, and you don't deserve any of it. He thinks I cheated. I know. And for what it's worth, I've reviewed your medical records. There's absolutely no reason you couldn't have conceived naturally with your husband. The timing aligns with your cycle. Everything points to this being exactly what you said it is, the miracle you've been waiting for. Sophia pressed her hands to her face, trying to hold back another wave of tears. Then why doesn't he believe me? Because sometimes people believe what they want to believe, especially when someone they trust is whispering poison in their ear. Dr. Carter's expression hardened slightly. Your mother-in-law has done a number on both of you. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, traffic hummed past the motel, indifferent to the small tragedy unfolding in room 117. I don't know how to do this, Sophia whispered. I don't know how to start over from nothing. You don't have to know right now. You just have to take the first step. Dr. Carter stood and offered her his hand. Come on, let's get you somewhere better than this. Sophia looked around the dingy motel room, at the bed she'd cried on all night, at the bag of belongings she'd hastily thrown together. Everything she owned fit in one small suitcase. She took his hand and stood. 2 hours later, Sophia was standing in a small apartment above a cafe called Morning Grace. It was modest, a studio with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and large windows that let in afternoon light. The walls were painted a soft cream color, and there were plants on the windowsill that someone had been carefully tending. Mrs. Chen was a tiny woman in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that seemed to see more than most people. My daughter lived here, she said, running her hand along the kitchen counter. Lily, she was a teacher like you used to be. She loved this place because she could hear the morning birds. I'm so sorry for your loss, Sophia said softly. Mrs. Chen smiled, sad but genuine. She would have liked you. She always said the world needed more gentle people. She pressed a key into Sophia's palm. Stay as long as you need. We'll worry about money later. Right now you just need somewhere to heal. After Mrs. Chen and Dr. Carter left, Sophia stood alone in her new space. It was smaller than the closet in the townhouse. It was simpler than anything she'd lived in since marrying Ethan. It smelled like coffee from the cafe below and had a radiator that clanked when it turned on. It was perfect. She placed her hand on her stomach and whispered to the tiny life growing there. We're going to be okay. I don't know how yet, but we're going to survive this. And for the first time since seeing those 2 pink lines, Sophia felt something that wasn't fear or desperation. She felt determination. She felt the first small spark of her own strength returning. The fall had been devastating, but she'd hit the bottom and discovered she was still breathing. Now came the hard part, learning to stand again. The first month was survival. Sophia woke each morning to the smell of coffee and fresh bread from the cafe below. The sounds of the espresso machine and quiet conversation became her alarm clock, gentle and oddly comforting. She'd lie in bed, hand on her growing belly, and remind herself to breathe. 1 day at a time, 1 hour if necessary, 1 minute if that's all she could manage. Mrs. Chen had a way of appearing at exactly the right moments. She'd knock softly and leave a plate of food outside the door, soup when Sophia's morning sickness was bad, ginger tea when nothing else would stay down, rice and vegetables when she needed something plain and simple. You need to eat for 2 now, Mrs. Chen would say through the door, never pushing her way in, always respecting Sophia's need for space. Dr. Carter checked on her weekly, claiming he was in the neighborhood, though Sophia knew he was going out of his way. He monitored her pregnancy, made sure her prenatal vitamins were working, and never once mentioned payment. "Consider it a professional courtesy," he'd say when she protested. Or better yet, consider it what decent people do for each other. The second month was slightly easier. Sophia's morning sickness began to ease, and with it came a restless energy that demanded outlet. She couldn't just sit in the apartment forever, hiding from the world. She needed purpose. She needed to do something with her hands. She'd always loved sewing. Her grandmother had taught her when she was young, patient hours spent learning stitches and patterns. After marrying Ethan, she'd given it up. Margaret had called it quaint, in a way that made it sound like an insult. But now, sitting in her small apartment with her grandmother's old sewing machine that she'd rescued from storage, Sophia found peace in the rhythm of needle and thread. She started with something simple, a tiny onesie for her baby, white cotton with delicate embroidery around the neckline. A small elephant, stitched in grey thread, its trunk raised in what looked like joy. When she finished it, she held it up to the afternoon light streaming through her window and felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Pride. She'd made something beautiful, something that hadn't existed before her hands brought it into being. Mrs. Chen saw the onesie when she came by with lunch. "You made this?" she asked, examining the stitching with careful attention. "It's for my baby," Sophia said, suddenly shy. "I know it's simple. It's lovely." Mrs. Chen looked thoughtful. "My customers are always asking where they can find quality baby clothes. Everything in stores now is mass-produced, impersonal. This has heart in it." "You think someone would buy something like this?" "I think many someones would." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Make a few more. I'll display them in the cafe. We'll see what happens." Sophia made 3 more that week. A onesie with a tiny giraffe, another with a sleepy moon, and a third with a rainbow arching across the chest. She used fabric scraps she found at a thrift store and embroidery thread she bought with the little money she had left. Mrs. Chen displayed them on a small shelf near the register with a handwritten sign, "Handmade with love, local artist." They sold within 2 days. A young mother named Claire bought the elephant onesie for her newborn son. She came back the next week asking if Sophia took custom orders. Her sister was pregnant and wanted something special, something that showed thought and care. "How much would you charge for a set of 3? Claire asked. Sophia had no idea. She'd never sold anything before. Mrs. Chen named a price that made Sophia's eyes widen. It seemed too high, too presumptuous, but Claire agreed immediately and placed the order. Word spread slowly but steadily through the neighborhood. A grandmother wanted a coming-home outfit for her first grandchild. A woman preparing for twins needed matching sets. A mother who'd lost a baby wanted something to donate to the hospital in her daughter's memory, something soft and beautiful for the tiniest fighters. That last commission made Sophia cry as she sewed it. She poured every ounce of love and loss and hope into those tiny garments, and when she delivered them, the woman hugged her and whispered, "Thank you for understanding." By the 3rd month, Sophia had more orders than she could handle alone. She created a simple website with help from a customer who worked in web design and offered to build it for free in exchange for a custom baby blanket. She opened an online shop and called it Little Miracles. The name felt right, because that's what her baby was, despite everything. A miracle that refused to be denied. Orders came from across the state, then from neighboring states. Mothers loved the personal touch, the way each piece was unique, the way you could feel the care stitched into every seam. Sophia worked late into the evenings, her apartment filled with fabric and thread and the quiet hum of her sewing machine. Her belly grew rounder, and sometimes she'd feel the baby kick while she worked, as if encouraging her to keep going. Dr. Carter visited on a Wednesday afternoon in her 4th month and found her surrounded by half-finished projects. "You're building something," he observed, picking up a onesie decorated with tiny stars. "I'm trying to," Sophia said, stretching her back. "I need to be able to support myself, support us." "You're doing more than surviving, Sophia. You're thriving." She looked around the small apartment, at the fabric organized in neat bins, at the orders pinned to a corkboard on the wall, at the growing balance in her new bank account that proved she could stand on her own feet. "I never knew I could do this," she admitted quietly. "When I was with Ethan, I stopped believing I could do anything." "He made you smaller," Dr. Carter said. "But you were never small. You just forgot your own size." Through it all, Sophia attended a support group for single mothers that Dr. Carter had recommended. Every Tuesday evening, she sat in a circle with 8 other women in various stages of pregnancy or early motherhood, and they shared their stories. There was Maya, 19 and terrified but determined. There was Patricia, 42, and doing it alone by choice after years of bad relationships. There was Jen, whose husband had died in a car accident when she was 6 months pregnant. Each story was different, but the thread connecting them was the same. They were all rebuilding themselves in the ruins of what they'd lost or never had. "Your worth isn't measured by who stayed or who left," the group leader, a therapist named Dr. Reeves, would say. "It's measured by who you become when you stop waiting for someone else to validate your existence." Sophia wrote that down in a journal she'd started keeping. She filled pages with thoughts she'd never been allowed to have in the townhouse, feelings she'd been taught to suppress, anger she'd been told was unbecoming. She wrote about Margaret's cruelty, about Ethan's cowardice, about the ways she'd made herself smaller to fit into a life that was never designed for her. But she also wrote about the baby's first kick, about Mrs. Chen's kindness, about the moment she held her first payment from Little Miracles and realized she'd earned it with her own hands. She wrote about learning to stand alone and discovering she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. 5 months passed, then 6, then 7. Sophia's belly grew round and prominent. Her face filled out, losing the gaunt hollows that stress and heartbreak had carved there. She smiled more easily. She laughed with customers in the cafe. She made friends with other vendors at the weekend farmers market, where she'd started selling her work. She bought maternity clothes from thrift stores and altered them herself. She painted the corner of her apartment that would become the baby's space, a soft yellow that reminded her of sunshine. She built a life from scraps and determination and the stubborn refusal to let cruelty define her. Meanwhile, miles away in Riverside Heights, Ethan lived in his empty townhouse with his mother and tried not to think about the wife he'd thrown away. He told himself he'd made the right choice, that he'd protected himself, that any man would have done the same. But late at night, alone in the master bedroom that still smelled faintly of Sophia's perfume, he'd wonder if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. He just didn't know yet that the truth was about to catch up with him, and that by the time it did, the woman he'd destroyed would have already risen from the ashes stronger than he'd ever known she could be. 18 months after throwing Sophia out, Ethan Harrison's carefully constructed world began to crumble. It started with whispers at the country club. Men he'd known for years would greet him with tight smiles and quickly find excuses to be elsewhere. Women who'd once flirted harmlessly now avoided eye contact. Conversations would stop when he entered a room, then resume in hushed tones after he passed. He told himself it didn't matter, that people were simply uncomfortable around divorce, that the gossip would fade once something more interesting came along. But the whispers grew louder. His business partner, Marcus Webb, called him into the office on a grey Tuesday morning. The older man's face was grave as he slid a folder across the desk. "You need to see this," Marcus said. Inside were bank statements, transfer records, forged signatures. Margaret had been systematically embezzling from the Harrison family trust for 3 years, siphoning money into private accounts, hiding expenditures under false invoices and phantom expenses. The amount was staggering, over $2 million. "How long have you known about this?" Ethan's voice came out strangled. "I discovered it last week during the audit. Ethan, this is criminal fraud. We have to report it, or we're complicit." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression a mixture of pity and disappointment. "Your mother has been stealing from your own family's legacy." Ethan sat in stunned silence, the papers blurring in front of him. This couldn't be real. His mother, who'd always preached about family honor and Harrison pride, had been robbing them blind. "There's more," Marcus said quietly. "Some of our clients have been asking questions about Sophia, about what really happened with your marriage. That's none of their business. Maybe not. But when Richard Thornton's wife heard the story, she convinced him to pull his account. We lost a $4 million portfolio because his wife thinks you're—" Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. "Morally reprehensible." The phrase hit like a slap. "She doesn't know the full story." "Then what is the full story, Ethan? Because right now all anyone knows is that you threw your pregnant wife out of your house and filed for divorce, and that your mother has been charged with fraud." Marcus stood. "Fix this, whatever this is, because the firm can't afford to lose any more clients over your personal life." That evening, Ethan sat alone in his study, a glass of scotch in his hand, staring at nothing. Margaret was in the guest wing, packing. Her lawyer had advised her to move out before the criminal charges were formally filed. She'd become bitter and defensive, blaming everyone but herself, the accountants who discovered her theft, the family who never appreciated her sacrifices, even Ethan for not protecting her. He'd barely spoken to her in days. Every time he looked at his mother, he saw a stranger, a woman who'd lied and stolen and destroyed, all while claiming to act in his best interest. The house felt enormous and empty. Every room echoed with absence. He'd fired the staff months ago, couldn't afford to keep them after the embezzlement was discovered and several clients left. Now he lived alone in 8,000 square feet of space that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. His friends had drifted away one by one. Some explicitly said they couldn't support how he'd treated Sophia. Others simply stopped returning calls, their silence speaking volumes. Even his cousin Daniel, the last family member who'd remained in contact, had grown distant. Their conversations were stiff and uncomfortable, filled with awkward pauses and unspoken judgments. Ethan poured himself another drink, his third of the night, or maybe his fourth. He'd lost count. The alcohol helped numb the growing sense that he'd made a catastrophic mistake, that everything he'd believed, everything his mother had whispered in his ear, had been lies built on manipulation. But admitting that would mean facing a truth too painful to acknowledge, that he'd destroyed an innocent woman because he was too weak to stand up to his mother. 6 months later, things got worse. The Harrison architecture firm lost another major client, then another. Ethan's reputation in the business community was damaged beyond quick repair. People didn't trust a man who'd treat his wife so cruelly, who'd let his mother steal from family coffers. He started drinking more heavily. Scotch at lunch, wine with dinner. Whatever it took to quiet the voice in his head that kept asking the same question: what if Sophia was telling the truth? Margaret was convicted of fraud and sentenced to 18 months of probation, community service, and ordered to repay the stolen money. The scandal made the local papers. The Harrison name, once synonymous with prestige, became associated with theft and betrayal. She moved to her sister's house 3 states away, claiming she needed to escape the persecution. Before she left, she tried one last time to justify what she'd done. "I was protecting you," she said to Ethan, her face hard with self-righteousness. That woman would have bled you dry. But Ethan couldn't even look at her. He'd spent his entire life seeking her approval, following her guidance, believing her wisdom, and she'd led him straight into ruin. The night Margaret left, Ethan sat alone in the townhouse and finally let himself remember. He remembered Sophia's face when she'd told him about the pregnancy, glowing with joy and hope. He remembered the tiny baby shoes she'd wrapped so carefully. He remembered how she'd begged him to believe her, tears streaming down her face, her hand protective over her stomach. He remembered throwing her out in her pajamas while neighbors watched. The guilt was a physical weight pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. 2 years after the divorce, Ethan hit his breaking point. It was 3 in the morning on a Saturday. He was drunk, sitting in his study surrounded by empty bottles and the wreckage of his life. His phone buzzed with an email, another client leaving the firm. He threw the phone across the room and watched it shatter against the wall. Then he called the only person who might still answer. Daniel picked up on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Ethan, it's 3 in the morning. I need to tell you something." The words came out slurred, desperate. "I need to tell someone before I lose my mind." "Are you drunk?" "Yes. No, I don't know." Ethan pressed his palm against his forehead. "Daniel, I did something terrible. I've been lying. About everything." There was a long pause. "What are you talking about?" And then it came pouring out. The confession he'd buried for years. The vasectomy. Ethan had gotten it done 6 months before marrying Sophia. He'd been 28, terrified of fatherhood, convinced he wasn't ready for children and might never be. But his father was pressuring him to marry, to produce heirs, to continue the Harrison legacy. So Ethan had lied. He'd told everyone, including Sophia, that he wanted a big family. He'd gone through the motions of trying to conceive while secretly knowing it was impossible. "I thought it would buy me time," he told Daniel, his voice breaking. "I thought eventually I'd figure out how to tell her the truth. But then years passed and she was so desperate to get pregnant, and I couldn't admit what I'd done. I'd stolen her choice, stolen years of her life." Jesus Christ, Ethan. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I convinced myself it was impossible, that she must have cheated. It was easier than admitting I'd lied to her for our entire marriage. Ethan was crying now, years of suppressed guilt finally breaking through. "My mother knew. She knew about the vasectomy. She used it to poison me against Sophia, to make me believe the worst." Daniel's voice was cold. "Do you understand what you've done? Vasectomies aren't always permanent. They can reverse naturally. It's rare, but it happens." Ethan's blood ran cold. "What?" "It's called recanalization. The tubes can reconnect on their own. That baby could have been yours, Ethan. Probably was yours." The room spun. Ethan gripped the edge of his desk, bile rising in his throat. "I destroyed her," he whispered. "I destroyed my wife over my own lies." "Yes," Daniel said simply. "You did." "What do I do? How do I fix this?" "I don't know if you can." Daniel's disappointment was palpable even through the phone. "But the first step is finding out the truth, and then praying that woman has more mercy than you ever showed her." After Daniel hung up, Ethan sat in the darkness and finally understood the full magnitude of what he'd done. He hadn't just divorced his wife, he'd destroyed her reputation, abandoned her while pregnant, thrown her out with nothing, all because he was too cowardly to face his own lies. And somewhere out there she was raising a child, his child probably, alone. A child he'd rejected, a daughter or son who would grow up knowing their father had called them a mistake. The weight of it was crushing. For the first time in 2 years, Ethan Harrison felt the full force of his own actions, and he understood, with devastating clarity, that some mistakes couldn't be undone. Some damage was permanent. But he had to try. He had to at least try to make it right, Even if she never forgave him, even if she refused to see him, he had to know the truth. He had to know if he'd thrown away the only real thing he'd ever had. Daniel couldn't sleep after Ethan's drunken confession. He lay awake in the darkness, his wife breathing softly beside him, and thought about Sophia. He'd only met her a handful of times at family gatherings, but he remembered her warmth, her gentle laugh, the way she'd tried so hard to fit into a family that never wanted her to succeed. He remembered the last time he'd seen her, at a Christmas dinner 2.5 years ago. She'd looked thin and tired, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Margaret had made some cutting remark about the dessert Sophia had brought, and Ethan had said nothing, just kept eating, pretending he hadn't heard. Daniel had wanted to say something then. He'd wanted to tell her she deserved better. But he'd stayed silent, complicit in the cruelty through his own inaction. Not this time. The next morning, Daniel called Dr. James Carter. It took some effort to find his number. He had to go through the hospital directory and claim it was a family medical emergency. When Carter finally answered, Daniel explained who he was and why he was calling. "Ethan told me about the vasectomy," Daniel said, "and that Sophia got pregnant anyway. I need to know if that's medically possible." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I can't discuss patient information," Dr. Carter said carefully. "I'm not asking you to violate confidentiality. I'm asking you a general medical question. Can vasectomies reverse themselves naturally?" Another pause, longer this time. "Yes, it's called spontaneous recanalization. It's rare, but it happens in approximately 1 to 3% of cases. The vas deferens can reconnect, restoring fertility." Daniel's grip tightened on his phone. So, if a man had a vasectomy years ago and his wife got pregnant, the baby could still be his? Absolutely. It would require testing to confirm, but it's entirely possible. Dr. Carter's voice hardened slightly. "Is this about Sophia Harrison?" "It is." "Then you should know that I reviewed Ethan Harrison's medical records from when he and Sophia were attempting to conceive. There was documented evidence of partial recanalization in his file from a routine exam. His fertility had partially returned. Any competent urologist would have seen it." The words hit like a hammer. He knew. The doctor who performed his annual physical 2 months before Sophia got pregnant noted it in his chart and recommended follow-up testing. Whether Ethan actually read that report or chose to ignore it, I can't say, but the information was there. Daniel closed his eyes. This was worse than he'd thought. Ethan might have known, might have buried that information and used it to destroy Sophia anyway. "Does Sophia know about this?" Daniel asked. "She knows the baby is biologically her ex-husband's. I confirmed it after Ethan's cousin called looking for information." Dr. Carter's tone was protective now. "But she's moved on, Mr. Harrison. She's built a life for herself and her daughter. Whatever your cousin wants, I hope he considers whether disrupting that life serves anyone but his own guilty conscience. He wants to make amends. Some things can't be amended." Dr. Carter's words were final. "Some betrayals are too deep." After hanging up, Daniel sat with the information for hours, weighing what to do with it. He could keep it to himself, let Ethan stew in his uncertainty. He could tell him the truth and watch his cousin break under the weight of what he'd done. Or he could let the truth speak for itself. In the end, Daniel chose the third option. He called 3 people: Marcus Webb, Ethan's business partner; Richard Thornton, the client who'd pulled his portfolio; and Eleanor Ashford, the biggest gossip in Riverside Heights' social circle. To each, he told the same story. Ethan Harrison had secretly gotten a vasectomy, lied to his wife for years, then destroyed her reputation when she got pregnant with what was actually his biological child. "He threw away his wife and baby over his own lies," Daniel said. And his mother helped him do it while she was stealing from the family trust. The whole thing is a masterclass in cruelty and cowardice. He knew what would happen. In a community like Riverside Heights, information like this spread faster than wildfire. By the end of the week, everyone knew. The version that circulated was even worse than the truth, embellished with each retelling. Some said Ethan had gotten the vasectomy to avoid paying child support to multiple women. Others claimed he'd been planning to leave Sophia all along and used the pregnancy as an excuse. A few suggested he'd driven his wife out to please his criminal mother. None of it was exactly accurate, but all of it carried the essential truth. Ethan Harrison had destroyed an innocent woman because he was too weak to face his own lies. The social consequences were swift and brutal. The remaining clients of Harrison Architecture withdrew their business. No one wanted to be associated with a man whose personal character was so fundamentally flawed. If he could betray his own wife so thoroughly, what would he do to business partners? Invitations dried up. The country club suggested, politely but firmly, that Ethan might be more comfortable elsewhere. Women who'd once considered him eligible now looked at him with disgust. Marcus Webb called a partners meeting and voted to remove Ethan from active leadership. "Your name is toxic right now," Marcus said, not unkindly but not gently either. "The firm can't survive if you're the face of it." Ethan tried to defend himself, tried to explain, but the explanations only made things worse. Every attempt to justify his actions sounded like exactly what it was. Excuses from a man who'd rather blame everyone else than face his own failures. Richard Thornton's wife, Patricia, was particularly vocal. She wrote an editorial in the local paper about men who used their power to destroy women who trusted them. She never mentioned Ethan by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. "We teach our daughters to be careful, to protect themselves, to watch for warning signs," she wrote. "But what about teaching our sons not to be the danger? What about holding men accountable when they use their privilege to crush the people who love them?" The piece went viral online, shared thousands of times with comments about similar experiences. Sophia's story, though never explicitly confirmed, became a symbol of something larger. A cautionary tale about trust and betrayal and the particular cruelty men could inflict on women who depended on them. Ethan's world contracted to the walls of his townhouse. He stopped going to the office, stopped answering calls, stopped pretending he had anywhere to be or anyone who wanted to see him. The house that had once been filled with staff and dinner parties and the trappings of success now echoed with emptiness. He wandered through rooms that felt like monuments to his own failures. At night, he'd stand in what would have been the nursery, the room he'd always told Sophia they'd use someday, and imagine what he'd lost. A daughter with Sophia's gentle eyes, a son with his mother's laugh from before Margaret poisoned everything. He imagined birthday parties and first steps and bedtime stories. He imagined the weight of a child in his arms, the trust in their eyes, the unconditional love he'd rejected before it could even begin. The guilt was a physical presence, sitting on his chest, making every breath an effort. Daniel came by once, 3 weeks after the truth had spread through Riverside Heights. He found Ethan unshaven, hollow-eyed, sitting in the dark. "You look like hell," Daniel observed. "I feel worse." Ethan's voice was rough from disuse. "Everyone knows now. Everyone knows what I did." "Good. They should know." Ethan looked up at his cousin, searching for sympathy and finding none. "Did you tell them?" "I told 3 people the truth. They told everyone else, but yeah, I started it." Daniel sat down across from him. "You asked me what you should do. This is step 1, facing the consequences of your actions." "Step 1, Ethan repeated bitterly. "What's step 2? "Finding out if that baby was yours, getting concrete proof, and then deciding whether you have any right to disrupt Sophia's life after what you put her through." "I need to see her," Ethan said desperately. I need to apologize to try to make this right. What you need is irrelevant. Daniel's voice was hard. What matters is what Sophia needs. And from what I've heard, she's doing just fine without you. What do you mean, what you've heard? Daniel pulled out his phone and showed Ethan a website. Little Miracles. It's Sophia's business. She makes custom baby clothes, apparently quite successfully. She has a 5-star rating and more orders than she can fill. Ethan stared at the screen, at photos of tiny garments embroidered with care and love. In the About section was a brief bio and a photo. Sophia was smiling in the picture, holding a baby in her arms. A girl with dark curls and Sophia's warm eyes. She looked healthy and happy, surrounded by racks of colorful fabric. She looked free. She had a girl, Ethan whispered. We had a girl. You don't know that yet, Daniel said, though his tone suggested he believed it was true. And even if you do, that doesn't mean you get to walk back into their lives. You threw them away, Ethan. You don't get to pick them back up just because you're finally feeling guilty. But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the photo, at the child who might be his daughter, at the wife he'd destroyed who'd somehow survived and built something beautiful from the wreckage. He'd lost everything, his business, his reputation, his friends, his family. But the thing he mourned most was standing in that photo, smiling and whole, surrounded by a life he'd never be part of, and he had no one to blame but himself. Nearly 2 years after being thrown out, Sophia stood in the community room of the Riverside Women's Shelter, reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar to a circle of wide-eyed children. Grace sat beside her, almost 18 months old now, her dark curls pulled into 2 small pigtails that refused to stay neat. She was a happy, chatty toddler who loved books and music and made friends with everyone she met. And he was still hungry, Sophia read with animated expression, making the children giggle. Grace clapped her hands. More, Mama, more! This was Sophia's favorite part of the week. Every Thursday afternoon she volunteered at the shelter, reading to the children whose mothers were rebuilding their lives after leaving dangerous situations. She understood their struggles in a way most volunteers couldn't. She'd been where they were, broken, alone, starting from nothing. The reading session was ending when she heard a commotion near the entrance, raised voices, the shelter director, Ms. Pamela, speaking firmly to someone. Sir, you can't just walk in here, this is a private facility. I just need to speak with Sophia Martinez. Please, it's important. Sophia's blood went cold. She knew that voice. She gathered Grace into her arms and stood slowly, her heart hammering. Several of the mothers noticed her distress and moved closer, forming an instinctive protective circle. Do you know him? One of them asked quietly. He's my ex-husband, Sophia said, her voice steadier than she felt. Want us to throw him out? The offer was genuine. These women understood what it meant to need protection from men who'd hurt them. But Sophia shook her head. No, I'll handle this. She walked to the entrance with Grace on her hip, every step requiring conscious effort. The little girl sensed her mother's tension and went quiet, her small hand gripping Sophia's shirt. Ethan stood in the doorway, and Sophia barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, his expensive suit hanging loose on his frame. His face was gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. His hair needed cutting, and there was a desperate, haunted quality to his expression that she'd never seen before. Behind him stood Margaret, smaller somehow, diminished. She wore a simple dress instead of designer clothes, and her face looked older, harder, etched with shame she'd never shown before. Sophia, Ethan breathed, his eyes immediately going to Grace. Please, I need to talk to you. We have nothing to discuss. Sophia's voice was calm, controlled. She'd practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times, imagined what she'd say if she ever saw him again. Please, Just 5 minutes. Miss Pamela looked at Sophia. Do you want me to call the police? Sophia considered it. She could have him removed, could maintain the boundaries she'd worked so hard to establish. But she could see the desperation in his face, and some part of her, the part that had once loved this man, wanted to hear what he'd come to say. It's okay, she said quietly. We'll talk outside. She walked past Ethan and Margaret into the parking lot, very aware of Miss Pamela watching from the doorway, ready to intervene if needed. Grace pressed closer against her shoulder, uncertain of these strangers. Ethan followed, and when Sophia turned to face him, he dropped to his knees on the pavement. I was wrong, he said, his voice breaking. God, Sophia, I was so wrong about everything. Get up, Ethan. You're embarrassing yourself. I don't care. But he stood anyway, his eyes fixed on Grace. Is she mine? Sophia's arms tightened protectively around her daughter. Does it matter? Yes, it matters more than anything. He took a step closer, and Sophia instinctively stepped back. He froze. I know now about the vasectomy reversal, about the recanalization. I know it was possible. I know Grace is probably mine. Probably. Sophia's voice hardened. You threw me away based on probably. You destroyed me because you probably thought I was lying. Now you want back in because you probably have a daughter. I know she's mine. I can see it. She has my mother's eyes, my father's chin. His own eyes filled with tears. Sophia, I destroyed you over my own lies. I got a vasectomy before we married and never told you. I stole years from you. And when you finally got pregnant with our miracle baby, I convinced myself it was impossible rather than face what I'd done. Margaret stepped forward, her voice quiet. I knew about the vasectomy and I used it to poison him against you. I wanted you gone, and I didn't care what it cost. Sophia looked at her former mother-in-law and felt nothing but profound weariness. Why are you telling me this now? Because I was wrong, Margaret said, and the admission seemed to cost her. Because I've lost everything, my reputation, my freedom, my family, and I've had time to understand what I did. I destroyed my son's marriage because I was selfish and cruel. I destroyed you because I was threatened by your goodness. Your apologies mean nothing to me. Sophia's voice was flat. You can't give me back the 2 years I spent believing I wasn't good enough. You can't give me back the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering what was wrong with me. You can't return the pieces of myself I had to rebuild from nothing. Ethan's face crumpled. I know I can't fix what I broke. But please let me meet her. Let me be a father to Grace. Let me try to make amends. Grace, sensing the tension, started to whimper. Sophia bounced her gently, soothing her with practiced ease. You want to be a father? Sophia's voice was soft but cutting. Where were you when I was throwing up every morning with no one to hold my hair back? Where were you when I went into labor terrified and alone? Where were you for her first smile, her first word, her first step? I know I missed everything. I know I have no right to ask. You're right, you don't. Sophia's eyes were dry, her composure absolute. You threw me away at the moment I needed love the most. You believed the worst of me without evidence. You let your mother destroy what we had, and you were too weak to stop her. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you. I don't want your life. The words came out with quiet finality. I don't want your apologies or your guilt or your desperate attempts at redemption. I want you to leave us alone. A car pulled into the parking lot, and Sophia felt a wave of relief as Dr. James Carter stepped out. He'd been picking up donated supplies for the shelter, and his timing was perfect. James walked directly to Sophia, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. His presence was calm and steady, a reminder that she wasn't alone, that she had people who chose to stand beside her. "Everything okay here?" James asked, his eyes on Ethan. Ethan stared at the other man's protective stance, at the familiar way he touched Sophia's shoulder, at the way Grace reached for him with a happy sound. "Jamesy," Grace said, her word for James, and he smiled as he took her from Sophia's arms. "Hey, little bug, did you have fun at story time?" The casual intimacy of the exchange was like a knife in Ethan's chest. This man knew his daughter, had been there for her first words, her milestones, her everyday moments. This man had the life Ethan had thrown away. "Who is this?" Ethan asked, though he already knew. "This is Dr. Carter," Sophia said. "He's been there for us since the beginning. He's been the support you should have been." James met Ethan's gaze steadily. "I think it's time for you to leave. You can't keep me from my daughter." "Watch me." Sophia's voice was steel. "You have no legal rights, Ethan. You filed for divorce, remember? You terminated your parental rights before she was even born. If you want to change that now, you'll have to go through the courts, and I will fight you every step of the way." "Sophia, please, no." She cut him off. "You had a choice. You chose to believe the worst. You chose cruelty over trust. You chose your mother over your wife. Now you live with those choices." Margaret stepped forward one more time. "For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry. You deserved better than what we gave you." Sophia looked at her for a long moment. "You're right. I did deserve better. And I found it. Not in your son, not in your family, but in myself, in my strength, in people who actually care about me." She turned back to James and Grace. "Let's go home." As she walked away, Grace waved over James's shoulder. "Bye-bye." The innocent gesture broke something in Ethan. His daughter, and she was his daughter, he could see it in every feature, was saying goodbye like he was a stranger, because that's what he was. A stranger who'd chosen pride and weakness over love. He watched them get into James's car, watched Sophia strap Grace into her car seat with practiced ease, watched them drive away together like a family. Margaret touched his arm. "We should go. I've lost everything," Ethan whispered. "My business, my reputation, my wife, my child, everything." "I know." Margaret's voice was hollow. "So have I. This is what we deserve." They stood in the parking lot of the women's shelter, two broken people facing the consequences of their own cruelty, and understood that some damage couldn't be repaired. Some betrayals were permanent, and the only justice available was watching the person they'd tried to destroy rise above them, stronger and happier than they'd ever be again. The months following the confrontation brought a strange kind of peace. Ethan tried at first to maintain contact. He sent letters that Sophia returned unopened. He had flowers delivered that she donated to the nursing home down the street. He opened a trust fund for Grace that Sophia's lawyer advised her to accept, not for Ethan's sake, but for her daughter's future. "Take his money," the lawyer said pragmatically, "but you don't have to take him." So Sophia accepted the child support checks and promptly donated them to the women's shelter. Every penny Ethan sent went to helping other women rebuild their lives. It felt like turning his guilt into something useful, transforming his attempts at redemption into actual good. After 3 months of rejected overtures, Ethan finally stopped trying. His business never recovered. Marcus Webb eventually bought out Ethan's share of the firm for a fraction of what it was worth, and the Harrison name was quietly removed from the letterhead. The company rebranded as Webb & Associates, and within a year clients started returning, without Ethan. He sold the Riverside Heights townhouse, too many memories, too much empty space, and moved to a modest condo across town. The furniture from his old life didn't fit in the smaller space, so he sold most of it. The wedding photo that had sat on the mantel ended up in a box in storage, too painful to look at, but impossible to throw away. Margaret, true to her sentence, served her community service at the same women's shelter where Sophia volunteered. The judge had a sense of irony, it seemed. The first time Margaret arrived for her shift and saw Sophia reading to the children, she'd frozen in the doorway. Sophia had looked up, met her eyes with cool indifference, and returned to the story without acknowledging her. They never spoke during those months. Margaret cleaned bathrooms and sorted donations, while Sophia continued her weekly readings and mentoring programs. The shelter director ensured they were never alone together, protective of her star volunteer. When Margaret's sentence ended, she moved to Maine to live with her sister. Before leaving, she left an envelope with the shelter director addressed to Sophia. Inside was a check for $50,000, partial repayment for the embezzled funds, and a single sentence written in Margaret's precise handwriting. "Some debts can never be repaid, but I had to try." Sophia donated the entire amount to establish a scholarship fund for single mothers pursuing education. She named it after Mrs. Chen's daughter, Lily. Meanwhile, Sophia's life bloomed in ways she'd never imagined possible. Little miracles expanded from her small apartment to a proper storefront on Main Street. She hired 3 other single mothers from the shelter's job training program, women who needed both income and the confidence that came from meaningful work. The shop became known throughout the region for its quality and heart. Celebrities discovered it through word of mouth and started ordering custom pieces. A lifestyle magazine featured Sophia's story, carefully edited to protect Grace's privacy, and orders tripled overnight. But success didn't change the core of what Sophia had built. She still sewed late into the night when inspiration struck. She still remembered the names of every customer's child. She still donated a portion of every sale to organizations supporting single mothers. Dr. James Carter remained a steady presence through it all. He'd never pushed, never rushed her, never tried to be anything more than a friend when that's all she could offer. But slowly, naturally, their friendship deepened into something more. It started with coffee after Grace's doctor appointments, then dinner when he'd swing by the shop to check on her after long days, then weekend trips to the park where they'd watch Grace play on the swings and talk about everything and nothing. James was patient in a way that healed something in Sophia. He didn't need her to be anything other than herself. He loved her strength but didn't require her to be strong every moment. He made space for her grief, her anger, her occasional bad days when the past crept up unexpectedly. And he was wonderful with Grace. The toddler adored him, calling him Jamesy and demanding he read her bedtime stories when he visited. He attended her second birthday party and helped her blow out the candles. He taught her to say stethoscope as a party trick that delighted everyone. One evening, 8 months after the confrontation at the shelter, James sat with Sophia on her small porch while Grace slept inside. The summer air was warm, filled with the sound of crickets and distant traffic. "I need to tell you something," James said quietly. Sophia's heart jumped, nervous but not afraid. "Okay. I'm falling in love with you." He looked at her directly, his eyes honest. "I have been for a while now, but I don't want to rush anything. I don't want you to feel pressured or obligated. I just needed you to know where I stand." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, examining her own feelings. When she'd first left Ethan, she'd been certain she'd never trust another man again. The idea of opening her heart to someone new had seemed impossible, but James had proven himself day after day, choice after choice. He'd shown up when things were hard. He'd respected her boundaries. He'd loved Grace without trying to replace anyone. He'd given Sophia space to heal without abandoning her in the process. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared of trusting again and being wrong." "I know. I'm scared too." James reached for her hand and she let him take it. "But I'm not Ethan. I won't lie to you. I won't let anyone come between us. And if you need time, months, years, whatever, I'll wait." "You shouldn't have to wait. That's my choice to make." He smiled gently. "You're worth waiting for, Sophia. You and Grace both." She thought about the man who'd thrown her away and the man who was choosing every day to stay. The contrast was so stark, it almost made her laugh. "I'm falling in love with you too," she said softly. "It terrifies me, but it's true." James lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles, a gesture both old-fashioned and sweet. "Then we'll be terrified together." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching fireflies dance in the darkness. 6 months later, on a quiet Saturday morning, James proposed, not with fanfare or public displays, but in Sophia's workshop, while Grace played with fabric scraps on the floor. He got down on one knee and offered her a simple ring, elegant but not ostentatious, chosen with care and attention to what she actually liked. "I know you've been married before," he said, "and I know that experience hurt you deeply. I can't promise I'll be perfect because I won't be, but I can promise I'll never make you smaller to make myself bigger. I'll never lie to protect my pride. And I'll love Grace like she's my own, because in every way that matters she already is." Sophia looked at him through tears, happy tears this time, not bitter ones. "Yes," she said simply. Grace looked up from her fabric scraps. "Mama crying?" "Happy tears, sweetheart," Sophia said, scooping her daughter into her arms. "Very happy tears." They married quietly 3 months later at the same women's shelter where they'd reconnected. Mrs. Chen made the cake. The employees from Little Miracles served as bridesmaids. Grace was the flower girl, taking her job very seriously as she scattered petals with intense concentration. The guests were people who'd earned their place through consistency and love. Shelter staff, customers who'd become friends, the single mothers from Sophia's support group, Dr. Carter's colleagues from the hospital. It was small and simple and absolutely perfect. No marble halls, no designer dresses, no guests who attended out of obligation rather than affection. Just people who'd chosen to show up, to celebrate love that had grown in the ruins of cruelty, to witness two people promising to build something real. When James kissed his bride, Grace cheered from Mrs. Chen's lap, and the whole room erupted in laughter and applause. Sophia had never felt more loved, more seen, more valued, for exactly who she was. That night in their new home, a modest house with a garden where Grace could play, Sophia stood at the window watching her daughter sleep in the next room. James came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Regrets?" he asked softly. "None," she said, and meant it completely. She thought about Ethan sometimes, wondered if he was okay, hoped he'd found some measure of peace. But she didn't miss him, didn't long for the life she'd lost. Because she understood now that she hadn't lost anything. She'd been set free, free to discover her own strength, free to build something authentic, free to love someone who saw her worth without needing to be convinced of it. The cruelty she'd endured had been devastating, but it had also been necessary, not because she deserved it, but because it had forced her to choose herself when no one else would. And in choosing herself, she'd found everything she'd actually been looking for. Not wealth or status or validation from people who'd never valued her anyway, but genuine love, hard-won peace, and the unshakable knowledge that she was enough. She'd always been enough. She just needed to fall completely apart to finally believe it. 3 years after being thrown out of her marriage, Sophia Martinez Carter stood in her garden, watching the morning sun paint everything gold. Grace was almost 4 now, a bright and fearless child who asked 1,000 questions a day and believed she could do anything. She was currently helping James plant tomatoes, her small hands covered in dirt, her laughter filling the air. "Daddy, look, I found a worm." "That's great, Bug. He's going to help our tomatoes grow." Sophia smiled at the word Daddy. It had come naturally to Grace about 6 months after the wedding. She'd never asked permission, never made a formal announcement. She'd simply started calling James Daddy one morning at breakfast, and he'd gone still for a moment, his eyes suspiciously bright, before clearing his throat and saying, "Yes, sweetheart." They'd never corrected her. Ethan had given up his rights to that title the day he threw them away. Sophia's hand moved to her rounded belly, 5 months pregnant with their second child. A boy this time, according to the ultrasound. Grace was ecstatic about becoming a big sister and had already decided his name should be Dinosaur. "We'll workshop that," James had said diplomatically. Little Miracles now had 2 locations and an online presence that shipped across the country. Sophia had been approached about franchising but had declined. She wanted to keep it personal, manageable, something that remained connected to its roots. She employed 15 people now, mostly single mothers or women rebuilding after hardship. The shop had become more than a business. It was a community, a support system, a proof that starting over was possible. The women's shelter had named their new education wing after Sophia. She'd tried to refuse the honor, but Ms. Pamela had insisted. "You're living proof that survival is possible," Pamela had said. "These women need to see that. They need to know that the worst moment of their life doesn't have to define the rest of it." So now there was a plaque reading, "The Sophia Carter Center for New Beginnings." And every time Sophia saw it, she felt the weight of responsibility and privilege, the privilege of having survived, of having the platform to help others do the same. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Rachel. "Flight lands at 3 p.m. Grace better be ready to be spoiled rotten." Sophia smiled. Rachel visited every few months now, and the sisters had rebuilt the closeness that Margaret had tried so hard to destroy. Rachel had apologized for not pushing harder when she'd sensed something was wrong during Sophia's marriage. "I should have made you talk about it," Rachel had said. "I wasn't ready to admit the truth," Sophia had replied, "not even to myself." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway drew Sophia's attention. Mrs. Chen emerged with several containers of food. She'd taken to bringing meals twice a week, claiming Sophia needed to eat for 2 and rest. "You're too thin," Mrs. Chen would scold, despite Sophia's obvious healthy pregnancy. "My grandchild needs more nutrition." Mrs. Chen had adopted the title of honorary grandmother with fierce pride. She attended every one of Grace's dance recitals, every holiday dinner, every milestone celebration. "Caillou gave me a family again," she told Sophia once, tears in her weathered eyes. "After my Lily died, I thought that part of my life was over, but you brought joy back into my kitchen." As Sophia helped carry the food inside, she caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. She looked different from the woman who'd stood in that marble bathroom 3 years ago, staring at a pregnancy test with shaking hands. Her face was fuller, healthier. Her eyes were clear and bright. She wore simple clothes that she liked rather than outfits chosen to please someone else. Her hair was longer, pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked like herself. Not a trophy, not an accessory, not a disappointment. Just Sophia, whole and real and free. That afternoon, the family gathered at the farmer's market where Sophia had a permanent booth for Little Miracles. Grace helped arrange the display, taking her job as assistant manager very seriously. She insisted on wearing her special name tag that James had made her, and she greeted every customer with enthusiastic professionalism. "Welcome to Little Miracles. We make baby clothes with love." James manned the cash register while Sophia chatted with customers, many of whom had become friends over the years. A young woman named Amanda, pregnant with her first child after leaving an abusive relationship, came by to show Sophia her ultrasound. "It's a girl," Amanda said, her eyes shining. "And I wanted to say thank you for everything, for the job, for listening, for showing me it's possible to do this alone." "You're not alone," Sophia said gently, squeezing her hand. "None of us are. That's the point." As the afternoon wore on, Sophia noticed a familiar figure standing at a distance, half hidden behind another vendor's booth. Ethan. He looked better than he had at their last confrontation, cleaner, more put together. But there was a permanent sadness in his face now, a weight that hadn't been there in their marriage. Their eyes met across the crowded market. He didn't approach, didn't wave, just stood there, watching his daughter laugh and play, watching his ex-wife thrive, watching the life he'd thrown away continue without him. Sophia felt no anger when she saw him, no pain, no longing, just a distant sense of pity for a man who'd destroyed something precious because he'd been too broken to recognize its value. James noticed him too. He moved closer to Sophia, protective but not aggressive. "Want me to ask him to leave?" James asked quietly. "No." Sophia watched Grace arrange tiny onesies with intense concentration. Let him see what he lost. Let him understand what real family looks like. They stood together, Sophia, James, and Grace, a portrait of the life Sophia had built from the ashes of cruelty. After a few minutes, Ethan turned and walked away, shoulders slumped, disappearing into the crowd. Sophia didn't watch him go. She was too busy helping a customer select a coming-home outfit for twins, too focused on Grace tugging her sleeve to show her a butterfly, too present in the moment to waste energy on the past. That evening, after Grace was asleep and James was reading in bed, Sophia sat at her sewing machine for one last project before she called it a night. She was making a baby blanket for their son, embroidering his name. They'd finally agreed on Oliver, in delicate blue thread. Each stitch was a meditation, a moment of gratitude, a tiny prayer of thanksgiving. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, broken and alone in a motel room, convinced her life was over. If she could go back and tell that woman what was coming, the pain, yes, but also the strength, the growth, the unexpected joy, would she? The answer surprised her. Yes, because that pain had been the chisel that carved away everything false, everything borrowed, everything that wasn't truly her. It had been brutal, but it had also been necessary. She'd needed to lose everything to discover what she actually was without it. And what she'd discovered was that she was enough. Had always been enough, would always be enough. Not because someone powerful chose her, not because she fit into someone else's vision of what she should be, but because her worth was inherent, unshakable, woven into the fabric of her being. James appeared in the doorway carrying 2 cups of tea. "You should rest," he said gently. "Almost done." She tied off the last stitch and held up the blanket. "What do you think?" "It's perfect, like everything you make." He kissed the top of her head. "Like you." They sat together in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from deep knowing and easy peace. "I saw Ethan today," Sophia said after a moment, "at the market." "I know. Are you okay?" "I am." She set down the blanket and turned to face him. "I used to wonder if I'd made the right choice marrying you, letting Grace call you Daddy, moving on so completely. But seeing him today, I realized something." "What's that?" "He didn't take anything from me that I wasn't meant to lose. Every betrayal, every moment of cruelty, every time he made me feel small, it all pushed me toward this, toward you, toward Grace, toward the woman I was always supposed to become." James cupped her face gently. "You would have become her anyway. You're strong enough." "Maybe, but I might not have believed it." Sophia placed her hand over his. "Sometimes God removes the wrong person from your life to make room for the right one. The love you deserve will never ask you to prove your worth. It will simply see it." "And I do see it," James said softly. every day, every moment, you are the most remarkable person I've ever known." They went to bed shortly after, and Sophia fell asleep to the sound of James's steady breathing and Grace's soft snoring from the next room. She dreamed of nothing, just restful darkness. And when she woke in the morning to Grace jumping on the bed and James laughing and sunlight streaming through the curtains, she felt what she'd been chasing her whole life. Peace, joy, home. Not in a place or a person, but in herself. She'd been thrown away like garbage and told she was worthless. She'd rebuilt herself into something unbreakable, and the life she'd built from that rubble was more beautiful than anything that had come before. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Because it was hers, and no one could ever take that away again. Sometimes the cruelest betrayal becomes the greatest blessing, not because the pain was deserved, but because it forces you to discover the strength you never knew you had. A woman's worth isn't determined by who believes her. It's determined by who she becomes when she stops waiting for validation. And the love you truly deserve will never ask you to prove yourself. It will simply see you, value you, and choose you every single day. If this story touched you, share it, comment, and subscribe for more soul-warming stories.